making. I'd like to turn the mic over to Sandra Ely now, who's the Environment Department's Director of Environmental Protection Division, for some opening remarks.
Hey, good afternoon. It's so good to be here with you. Secretary Kenny wasn't able to join us today. He really wanted to, but had an unexpected out-of-town visit that he had to make. But I'm really happy to be here with you to kick off this stakeholder engagement process. Public participation is very important to the department, and we are committed to working with you all and informing you as we move along in this clean car effort to get your input and let you know how things are proceeding. This is a key element to Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's climate change strategy. In 2019, the governor signed an executive order on climate change and energy waste. And in that order, she directed state agencies to reduce emissions of greenhouse gas emissions. And this department in particular has been very busy developing groundbreaking rules on ozone precursors and methane in the oil and gas industry. And we're very proud of that work. It's been about 2 years in the making. And now we're starting down this Clean Car Initiative road with you all. Adopting clean car standards in New Mexico is important to the state's economy, to improving the air that we breathe, and saving New Mexicans money at the pump. We are partnering with the city of Albuquerque in this effort so that we can ensure consistency of the rules as it's applied across the state. And I'd like next to hand this off to our partners with the city of Albuquerque. I'm pleased to introduce Maura Bernstein, the Acting Director for the Environmental Health Department. Maura?
Thank you, Director Ely. So yes, I'm Maura Ilana Bernstein, Acting Director of the Environmental Health Department. I'm honored to be here to represent the city. Of course, Mayor Keller wasn't able to be here tonight, but wanted to show the city's support. Sorry, I'll speak up. Mayor Keller wasn't able to be here tonight, but wanted to show the city's support for developing clean cars regulation. So without further ado, let's play his remarks.
Here in Albuquerque, our administration prioritizes sustainability in our environment. And it's the right thing to do, especially for future generations. We're very excited about the entire state and the Clean Car Act because it's a key component to achieving the sustainability goals and the climate change goals that we've really set out. And so as we move forward, our city stands in solidarity with the state for the changes that we're going to make to keep our air cleaner, primarily by having some reasonable common sense regulations with respect to some of our cars that add so much particulates and pollutants to the environment. So for us, this is part of a bigger strategy. It's about a transition to renewable energy. It's also about converting our fleet at the city of Albuquerque to electric vehicles, even transitioning our buses to electric buses over the next 10 years. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in today, and we're excited about all we can do together for the future of our environment.
Great. So the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Joint Air Quality Program is administered by the City of Albuquerque's Environmental Health Department, and we're authorized to implement and enforce clean air laws within the boundaries of the City of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County. This means that we're a separate air quality jurisdiction from NMED, and that's why it's critical that our two agencies partner and collaborate on this effort. In addition to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing ground level ozone pollution is one of our city's priorities, as Bernalillo County's levels are high and climbing. Cars are a significant source of ozone-forming pollutants, which have negative health impacts. Adopting clean car standards for new cars sold in New Mexico are needed to protect the health of people living in the Albuquerque-Bernalillo area, especially for those living along roadways and sensitive populations. Thank you.
Here.
All right. So today's agenda for the meeting, we're going to talk about the clean car standards and their benefits, for the economy and job opportunities, for health, in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to discuss a little bit about what the clean car standards are, what our path for adoption is. We're going to discuss how you can find out more and what your public engagement opportunities are. And finally, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions and provide input to us. Let's jump right into why clean car standards are good for the economy and jobs. For starters, the standards put money into the pockets of New Mexicans. Cleaner air means less money going towards health treatments. It means more efficient vehicles. It means that New Mexicans will spend less money at the pump. And for electric vehicle owners, electric vehicles have lower lifetime ownership costs because of lower fueling costs and much lower maintenance costs. For example, the average equivalent electricity fueling cost for an electric vehicle is 75 cents a gallon. And you all probably know what it costs to fill up your car at the fueling station right now and what the cost per gallon is. In my neck of the woods, it's over $3 per gallon. Second, the drive, the other good drive for the economy is the investment in the economy. These standards provide more choices in electric vehicles, which means consumers have more options on how to spend their money on new cars. The EV charging network that's needed to fuel electric vehicles creates jobs, and these standards also spur innovation in the automobile industry, which also creates jobs.
So I can speak to this slide. So adopting these standards will help reduce air pollution levels in our jurisdiction, as I mentioned. And cars and trucks are the primary sources of fine particulate matter and ozone forming pollutants. As I mentioned, our ozone levels are high and they're projected to increase. So one of my agency's goals is to reduce this pollution to protect public health. Our monitoring network reports that our jurisdiction is close to violating the federal standards for ozone. And it's important that we take action because fine particulates and ozone can cause adverse health effects such as those listed on this slide. And this includes difficulty breathing, coughing, fatigue, and worsening respiratory conditions. So to reach our goal, we've launched an ozone reduction initiative, which includes developing a clean cars rule, as well as participating in EPA's Ozone Advanced program, updating our vehicle emissions testing program, and several other strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. The third primary benefit of the clean car standards are that they address the greenhouse gas emissions that are responsible for global warming. As shown in this pie chart of New Mexico's 2018 greenhouse gas emissions profile, transportation makes up 14% of our state's emissions, the second largest source of emissions behind those produced by the oil and gas sector. Of that 14%, 63% comes from light and medium duty passenger vehicles, which these standards address. By adopting clean car standards, we're helping reach the governor's target of reducing emissions by 45% by the year 2030 from 2005 levels. The adoption of clean car standards is only one of the many tools in the toolbox needed to achieve greater decarbonization in the transportation sector. We need all the tools in the toolbox, including those shown in the slide. We need an all hands on deck approach. There are many different solutions for the different situations. In the image, you can see that the clean car standards are shown in the bubble with the green dashed border. Additional tools that are available to the Environment Department and other state agencies in transportation are shown in the bubbles that have the fat dashed blue outlines. So for example, the governor will be putting forward a clean fuel standard bill on her call in the next legislative session. Because of the great economic opportunity a bill such as Clean Fuel Standards offers. And New Mexico will be working closely with the New Mexico Economic Development Department on this tool to help reduce carbon intensity in fuels. Also, the governor has announced her intention to create New Mexico as a hydrogen hub, another way to pave New Mexico's path towards a greener future with high-paying jobs. Hydrogen is a low carbon intensity fuel alternative for passenger vehicles, fleet, and heavy-duty vehicles, and New Mexico wants to have a role in this emerging market. New Mexico also works with the Department of Transportation and Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department to build out EV charging infrastructure. New Mexico has provided over $2.5 million for EV charging infrastructure in rural and urban communities via the VW settlement funding, making sure that EV vehicles are available for all New Mexicans. Locating these EV charging stations in a strategic way has also allowed some of New Mexico highways to be designated as alternative fuel corridors. The city of Albuquerque has their own strategies for achieving the decarbonization of transportation. We saw in the video from the mayor that he described one of the strategies was to transition public transportation buses to all electric in the next 10 years, starting with the 6 new buses this year. And the city is also leading with their own fleet procurement of zero emissions first. Other state agencies are also deploying tools from the toolbox. DOT is engaged in multimodal transportation planning. Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources and the Department of Transportation are getting charging stations built along transportation highways. The federal government obviously is also playing a role now. They're expected to announce new car standards that address corporate average fuel efficiency by the end of this month. And California is working on more stringent clean car standards that may take into effect in about 3 to 4 years. California has mandated that by 2035, all light duty vehicles offered for sale in California will be zero tailpipe emission vehicles. So all of this action certainly drives home several points about the decarbonization of transportation. One, there is no one silver bullet. We need many differently sized solutions. 2, that this requires both a whole of government and a holistic approach. And beyond government, businesses, industry, communities, environmental groups, individuals, we all are making choices that lead to the solution of lower carbonized transportation. Okay, after that, let's talk specifically about the clean car standards. What are they? The clean car standards allow under federal law that states may choose to adopt California's clean car standards. California's clean car rules reduce emissions in the transportation sector. Once in effect, these new clean cars will have lower emission vehicles and zero emission vehicles offered on the car lots. The standards reduce toxic and ozone-forming air pollutants and greenhouse gas emissions from light and medium duty vehicles. And they also drive more investment and innovation in car technology. The Clean Car Standards have two parts. The first is a low emission vehicle standard, sometimes called the LEV standard, which requires manufacturers to reach a higher efficiency in the fleet they deliver to New Mexico dealers. This results in cleaner traditional cars like passenger cars, SUVs, and pickups. The second part is a zero emission vehicle standard, sometimes called the ZEV standard. This requires auto manufacturers to deliver zero emission passenger vehicles to their lot. These can include cars like battery electric vehicles, sometimes just called electric vehicles or EVs, or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and other vehicles that use alternative fuels. Sandra, would you like to take the slide?
Yes, thank you, Claudia. So this slide kind of summarizes what clean cars will do and what they do not do. I'm going to start with what they do not do. And they don't apply to the vehicle you currently own. You don't have to retrofit your vehicle. It does not apply to existing vehicles or used vehicles. It does not apply to off-road or heavy-duty vehicles like farm equipment. And it does not require additional emissions testing. Right now, Bernalillo County is the only place in the state that requires emissions testing. We don't have anything in the works to go beyond that, and these new clean car standards will not require any additional emissions testing. It doesn't require you to purchase an electric vehicle. It does require that they be made available to you, but it doesn't require that anybody purchase it. It will not ban the sales of SUVs or pickup trucks. In fact, I'm pretty excited about some of the new technologies that are coming out. Ford is going to have an F-150 in a few months this coming year, which is really great news. And it will not increase taxes or the costs to consumers over the lifetime of the vehicle. This is an important element in helping us meet our greenhouse gas emission reductions goal. We anticipate that a clean car standard applied statewide will reduce carbon dioxide emissions by about 2 million tons by 2030. It will only apply to light and medium duty vehicles. As Acting Director Bernstein noted, it will make improvements in air quality across the state. Not only will it improve ozone levels, it will help with particulates. And it's not only Bernalillo County that is struggling to reduce ozone levels. We have 7 counties overall in New Mexico with elevated ozone. And these rules will, by improving air quality, will help make New Mexicans healthier and avoid fewer emergency room visits and allow more people to be on the job more of the time if they are not in the emergency room. This will also expand choices for consumers. You will have more options. And I do think that we deserve to have some of the same vehicle options as other clean car states have. So that's just a quick summary of what these vehicle standards will do and won't do. Next slide, please, Claudia. And so we are seeking adoption of the California standards. The federal law allows states to adopt either the federal standards or the California standards, and the California standards have fewer emissions related to them, and so that's one reason we're going down that path. And as noted earlier, Albuquerque has its own jurisdiction, and so it's in air quality jurisdiction. So it's imperative that we work hand in hand with the city as we go down this path in considering rules for the state and considering rules to bring forth to our air quality boards. Those rules have to be identical in order to meet federal and state law. So for the Environment Department, our regulatory board is the Environmental Improvement Board. And for the city, their regulatory board for their environmental health program is the Albuquerque County Air Quality Control Board. If the boards agree to hear these rules, it is our intent to request a joint rule so that the boards can deliberate together and consider the discussion as a joint board. We did this previously back in 2007, and I was here then. We held a joint hearing in front of both boards, and we successfully adopted the Clean Car Standards. Those standards were retracted under the next administration, so they're no longer on our books with the state. But we know that we have held joint hearings before. We know we've been successful at that. And once we get in front of our regulatory board, we will propose a joint hearing with the city, should they choose to take up the petition. Thank you.
All right. So I would now like to describe the process that we are going to go through to bring a petition before the boards that Sandra just mentioned. So, so what will happen next in this process? So we're here today for our kickoff meeting with you. We're going to continue to have informational sessions over the next few months. And so if you haven't taken the survey, we'll put that link up again sometime in the next few minutes. And when you, one of the questions in that is, what would you like to know more about? And so by answering some of those questions, we can make sure that our future informational sessions are geared towards what you would like to learn about. And then we will file a rulemaking petition before the two boards in December. And we are hoping that they will then choose to act on the petitions and hold a joint hearing in May of 2022. If that schedule holds, then with a little bit of post-hearing activities, including a final decision from the board, these rules could be adopted by October of 2022, making them effective based on the Clean Air Act that requires a 2-year hold period by 2025. We really appreciate you being here today, and we want you to continue to be informed. And so we're trying to create as many different ways to allow you to stay informed. We have an email listserv set up through GovDelivery, and you can follow this link into to sign up as a subscriber to the Clean Cars New Mexico listserv. You can also periodically visit our websites, both the NMED website as well as the City of Albuquerque website. Will be updated regularly with our information. And so the links there to those websites is given to you. You can, of course, follow us on social media too. So those are ways in which you can stay in the loop. We also want to hear from you. So we're making sure that we build in many opportunities for you to provide feedback and input to us. We're going to, we appreciate that you're here, and we look forward to what happens next, which is the conversation with you. We also are interested in coming to your organizational meetings. If you are part of an organization and you'd like one of us to come, give a quick presentation and have a discussion over what we are planning, we are happy to come to your meetings. We're also looking to do some in-person meetings across the state, and we're still developing the timeline for that. We will be putting out a discussion draft of our rules, hopefully in October. And when those come out, we look forward to hearing from you on those those rules and how they, what you think of them, and if you have any proposed input or changes to them. And of course, because we're following a formal rulemaking process, there is always opportunity for the public to participate during the formal rulemaking process, including the hearing before the two boards. Finally, before we move to the question and answer period, we want to make sure you know how to reach us. So here's my information, my phone number and my email. From the city of Albuquerque, Daria Rocha, who's the environmental health manager with the Environmental Health Department, is the contact person with the city of Albuquerque. And so we've also added his phone number and email there. Feel free to reach either of us with your questions. I've gotten, just in preparation for the meeting today, perhaps 5 emails so far, and it really is great to hear from you and to understand more about what you're concerned about, what your thoughts are, what your ideas are. It really does help make this process more robust, which is what we are seeking to do. So now that ends our formal presentation, and now we are going to be wanting to hear from you. So I noticed that there are quite a few questions in the chat, but perhaps we will get through those too. And this would be a chance to raise your hand also, and we'll call on you, and you can unmute yourself and let us know what you're thinking. If you're on the phone, you can raise your hand with a *9. And then once called upon, you can also unmute yourself with *6. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and we're going to go back into Zoom gallery mode and have a fruitful question and answer session. Thank you again for attending this meeting today, and we really appreciate you choosing to join us today.
Hi there. So this is Maddie, and we'll go ahead and get started with questions. We had a few in the chat, so we'll do a couple of those first. So let's get started here. Why does it require so much information time when the rules are not negotiable? We have to accept the California standards or not, right?
Well, it's true. There are only 2 requirements that states have the option to pick up. That's either the California standard or the federal standard. But there is a little bit of flexibility in how you implement those standards. You can't have a third car. There's only federal and the California car. But you could charge fees, for example. There's some flexibility in how you administer the requirements. I think it's important for the state and the city to think about how they will administer it together. Will there be one report coming to the state that we share with the city? So these are all discussions that have to be had. There's enforcement discretion. So while there's really only 2 standards that can be adopted under the federal law, there is some flexibility about how you do that. There's also questions about how you implement what's called credits for the zero emission vehicles. And so we really look forward to working with the stakeholders to sort through some of those issues. Thanks, Maddie.
Okay. Next question. Go ahead, Sandra.
Oh, I just want to note that we are taking these questions down, and we will be working on frequently asked questions that we'll also be able to post. And you may have noticed that this presentation is being recorded. So we'll also make sure that this material is passed along in a recording that we'll be putting on our website as well. And if we can't answer a question today, we'll note it, we'll put it in the FAQs, and we'll try to get back to you that way.
That's right. Thanks, Sandra. So I'll call in someone who wants to verbally ask their question. Ken Ortiz, do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, Maddie. Good to hear from you. And Sandra, good to see you. My question is, someone mentioned that the governor in the next legislative agenda is going to put the Clean Fuel Standards bill on her call. I guess my question is, why isn't this process going through the legislative process instead of the rule process? As you know, when it goes through the legislative process, there's fiscal impact reports talking about the cost, legislative analysis, et cetera, that seems to be much more possibly thorough than a rulemaking process. Can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Certainly. Thank you, Ken, for that question. So the States Air Quality Control Act gives the boards, both boards, the local board and the Environmental Improvement Board, the authority to adopt clean car standards, provided we are consistent with federal law. And in going through that rulemaking process, there are a number of requirements that have to be addressed and items for the boards to consider before they can adopt, including things like economic impacts and impacts to the environment, impacts to the community. So as we go through this rulemaking process, we put together a very robust technical support document and provide technical testimony that gets at the number of issues that you've addressed. The legislature saw it within their wisdom to give us the authority to do this without having to go back to them. But they've also were wise enough to say, and to do this, you have to make these points. You have to prove certain things to the boards before they can adopt it. Mara, I'd like to give you an opportunity to address Mr. Ortiz's questions too. If I missed something, please go ahead and fill in.
Thank you. I think you covered that.
Thank you both. Sandra, I had one more question while I have the floor. One of the bullet points was paying less for car ownership. Can someone describe what that means or what you're looking at as far as less total ownership to own a vehicle?
Yeah, we're looking at the consumer reports regarding the lifetime of the vehicle. And in some cases, you may have more upfront cost for some of these vehicles, but you also have lower long-term cost over the life of the vehicle, whether that's maintenance or fuel costs associated with the vehicles. Ideally, we will still have tax credits, at least the federal tax credits, to support these vehicles as people have those vehicles available to them on the showroom so they can purchase them. But we're looking at lifetime costs, and we're looking at some of the reports coming out of the consumer reports. Again, this will be part of our technical testimony as we go before the boards to present the option to adopt clean car standards in New Mexico.
Thank you. One last question is, you mentioned that light vehicles and SUVs would not be banned. Traditional vehicles will not be banned for consumer purchase. What about just regular passenger cars? Will they be banned? Because it wasn't specifically, it mentioned SUVs and light vehicles.
Thank you for asking that clarifying question. Yeah, no, we're not banning any of these vehicles. That was the point to make. And what we hear often from consumers is, we can't support LEVZEV standards because I won't be able to drive my pickup truck, or I want to drive my SUV. And we just wanted to make the point that the variety of models will still be there, that in fact, manufacturers are getting so innovative these days. It's really exciting to see where they're going, where Ford, where GM, are going with these new models that are out there. So that bullet was just to assure people that SUVs and trucks will still be available under these standards.
Thank you for that clarifying. I guess last question, questions keep on popping up. You mentioned that it was adopted under the Richardson administration. It was then rolled back, I understand, under the Martinez administration. Can you speak to us a little bit about why it was rolled back? Was there problems or issues with the rules in place that led to the rollback, if you will?
No, I have to say, Ken, I wasn't in the Air Quality Bureau at that time when the vehicle standards were rolled back, so I don't know the justification. I've been in state government a long time, but I don't know exactly why they did that. Now, I know there may not have been a whole lot of concern at the time because the Obama LEVZAN standards and the California standards were very close. There was just a little bit of difference between the emissions, between what was going on at the federal level and what was going on with the California standards. So, maybe people weren't as concerned about it, but I really can't speak to why the Martinez administration rolled those standards back.
If you have any information going forward, I'd love to hear back on that, just to see what were the reasons why it was rolled back. Seemed to me there could have been some problems. Thank you all. Maddie, thank you. Sandra, thank you for allowing me to ask several questions.
I look forward to further conversation, Mr. Ortiz.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Thank you, Ken. So we have another question in the chat that it looks like one of our colleagues at Department of Transportation answered, but I'll let him speak a little more if he'd like to about that. We had a question, is there any chance that Tesla will be allowed to do business in New Mexico? Jerry, did you want to address that?
Yeah, no, thank you. And absolutely. So there was an attempt in the 2019 legislative session to change the law. And this is, again, my background in motor vehicle division, right? This falls under the purview of motor vehicle. And unfortunately, what the law states is that it is unlawful for a manufacturer, distributor, or representative to be licensed as a dealer or perform warranty or other services in our state. And so in a nutshell, a manufacturer cannot be considered a dealer. They have to be an established dealer. And so until that law changes, the business model of Tesla is not conducive to the current New Mexico laws, allowing them to be a dealer in the state of New Mexico. And that's something maybe that even Mr. Ortiz has a little bit more information on, as he's representing the Auto Dealership Association. But until that law changes, they cannot act as a dealership as a manufacturer.
Okay, thank you for that. Next, we'll go to Tammy Feeblecorn. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Tammy.
Thank you very much. So my question is, we've known that this was coming since the governor first announced that we were going to be doing this back in 2019. And it didn't happen in 2019, and it didn't happen in 2020, and it hasn't happened in 2021. There is some urgency in making really quick, swift climate change action on the state level. We heard that there were resource constraints, and so a group of environmental advocates got together and did all the work up front. We created the petition, and we committed it to the EIB and also to the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Air Quality Control Board. The petitioners on that are Center for Civic Policy, Conservation Voters New Mexico, Natural Resources Defense Council, Plug in America, Prosperity Works, Sierra Club, Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, 350 New Mexico. That is on the agenda for this Friday's EIB meeting. And so my question is, to minimize the resource needs and to move quickly on climate change, why doesn't New Mexico Environment Department just support that petition that's going to be heard on Friday?
Hey, Tammy, thank you for that question. And, I really, appreciate your efforts and other people's efforts to get us on track to meeting our emission reduction goals. It's unfortunate we don't have the resources to do both the ozone precursor rules this year and other air quality issues this year, as well as clean cars. And I know you've done a fair amount of work up front, but in order to bring a rule to the board, it takes a fair amount of technical analysis by the department to understand the costs, to understand the environmental impacts, to understand the impacts to the community, to do the stakeholder outreach that's necessary to make sure that we're addressing the credits properly, the enforcement, the administration, the reporting requirements. So we feel like we have to be involved in rulemaking in order to get this right so that we can administer it. We really appreciate you looking out for our interest and trying to help out. I know our values are kind of lined up in many ways. I just wish we had a larger department with more resources, with more staff, so that we can hit more of these targets more quickly. And I know the board's going to hear this on Friday, and we'll be there all ears, wondering what they're going to say and how they're going to manage this process. It's our intent, though, to move this as quickly as we can with the resources that we have, and go through a robust stakeholder process and take the time to develop those reports so that the board has all the information they need to make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks, Tammy. We'll go to another question from the chat. Aren't SUVs and pickup trucks classified as either light duty or medium duty? Why are they not included?
They are included. Pickup trucks and SUVs will be included in the clean car standards. That's right. We're not looking at heavy duty. We're not looking at off-road vehicles for this. I know the Biden administration may be looking at that, but we're only looking at light duty and medium duty, which will include SUVs and pickup trucks.
Thanks, Sandra. We have someone whose hand is raised over the phone. It's a 928 area code, it looks like. If you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I was double muted. Thanks for the opportunity to ask a question. This is Sarah Hurto, and I work for the Nature Conservancy based in Albuquerque. I have two questions for you, actually. One is, because the standards have been in place in the past and were jointly approved by the city/county board and the state, is there any way to reinstate that without through new rulemaking process? And my second question is, what happens if the California standards change while we're going through this long drawn out process of the rule making before it gets enacted at the end of next year?
I'm going to get your first for asking that. The rules are actually still in place at the city, but they're not in place with the state and retracted. And so we have to go through the rulemaking procedure to reinstate them. And because the cities has to be exact and the states have to be exactly alike, we have to do this together. Now, we can certainly learn from experience. I mean, it was 14 years ago. Things have changed. Technology has changed. The California standards have changed. And we have new administrations that may want to implement these rules differently. So we can certainly build on that experience and those rules. But there's no way that we can not go through the rulemaking process. Maura, do you want to add on to that at all?
Yeah, I'll just say that the rules have been updated since they were on the books, and so they're no longer valid.
That's right. So the California rules have changed, and so our rules would have to change. Exactly. And the other question was, what happens if California changes their rules while we're going through this process? And it's true that California is considering updating their standards and adopting what's called a Advanced Clean Car 2. We'll be learning more about that next year. And as California changes, we'll have to either change or go back to the federal standard. That's going to be the requirement.
And so will there be an opportunity to have some sort of clause in the new rule that as California changes their standards, New Mexico will follow with those, or it will have to go back through a whole new rulemaking process to be able to adopt the new California standards?
That's an excellent question too. You are informed on this process because adoption by reference is a tool, that some states have been able to use. We've determined that we can't adopt the California rules by reference, that the change is significant enough that it's our obligation and our responsibility to go back to the board, to go back to the stakeholders and inform them of the changes, let them know about what's happening, and have that decision be made again. We're willing to do that. From what we can tell from this perspective of July 2021, we will want to do that, but it's, I think, our responsibility and legal obligation to go back to stakeholders and back to the board with the whole same question again, but for a new set of rules.
Thanks, Sandra. Next question we have is from the chat. Has anyone from the city or state laid out a plan with PNM to see how much they will need to add to the current load to support an EV program?
You know, I know PNM is looking at requirements to address the load from transportation. All utilities are. They're actually obligated to go before the public's Public Regulatory Commission to address the infrastructure issues as well, and to have a plan related to that. So, but it's a good question. We should be incorporating these discussions with our utilities. More than we actually are. We are starting our stakeholder process, and so I welcome that suggestion.
Okay, thanks, Sandra. And we'll go to Pete Chipman.
Hi, Pete Chipman of Plug in America. I definitely appreciate the situation you're in. I just wonder about the opportunity cost if the rules don't go through this year of not taking advantage of the incoming federal resources on charging infrastructure, vehicle rebates, electric school buses, other supplemental clean transportation energy resources. You know, I hate to see New Mexico get left behind as other states jump forward that are more prepared for the coming future of transportation. Right, and I know it's you know, a process is a process, but I just wonder if you guys are considering the opportunity cost as well, with the billions in supplemental funding possibly coming the state's ways.
You know, Pete, if you have an opportunity to lay those out for us in writing, I'd love to see what you're thinking on that. That would be great. I don't know.
Referring to the bipartisan bill and the reconciliation bill, who knows what comes out of that? But it started off with $174 billion just on clean transportation from President Biden. I'm sure, you know, the question is how much will that be clawed back in reconciliation? But whatever comes out, it should be substantial. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Sandra.
No. But thank you for clarifying your comment. Yeah, we have our eye on that as well. But if you've got something you want to submit to us, that would be great. And I guess maybe we'll know more about what's going to happen at the federal level with that in next several weeks.
It's difficult, right? Because you're trying to decide this process, but at the same time, you don't know what's going to come out. But if it's good and you're not ready for it, tricky. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks, Pete and Sandra. Let's see, where are we at here? How will these vehicles pay their fair share of road use taxes if not at the gas pump?
Yeah.
Sandra, you muted.
I thought I unmuted. That's a conundrum that's been in front of the state legislature a few years in a row now, because if they're not pumping as much gas, they're not going to be paying as much taxes, which is what we use to repair our roads. And I know there was an initiative to, require EV owners to pay more and to tax and rev to go towards a fund. And I'm sure that's going to come up again. So that issue hasn't been fully addressed, but I'm sure it's going to come up again. I'm going to see if Jerry Valdez with DOT has anything he'd like to add to that.
Absolutely, and thank you. And so that's the $1 million question, right? And so we're part of RUC West. Joe De La Rosa represents the Road Usage Charge Consortium, which consists of the Western states. And we're looking at options. There are other states that have looked at pilot programs. They entail, miles traveled, as well as even some states, believe it or not, are looking at toll roads. And so rest assured, this is a very hot topic for the DOT. We're involved with other states, and we'll continue to explore options that make it fair and equitable as we're seeing an increase of electric vehicles on the road, and making sure that we're also not de-incentivizing the use of electric vehicles as well, because I think that's an important part, is as we're trying to get legs under these initiatives, we don't want to de-incentivize the expansion of these electric vehicles. So DOT is on the front line of this road usage charge issue that New Mexico will be facing in the upcoming decade.
Thanks, Sherry. Next, we'll go to Steve Douglas.
Thanks. This question for Sandra, or actually for Sandra and Mara, and it's kind of the coordination between Albuquerque and New Mexico. And I assume that these are perfectly aligned in terms of adoption, so the timing is the same for both. But then it's kind of in implementing the regulations is, are the reports going to a single source? Are we trying to divvy up, like this car went to this place, that car went to that place? So kind of how the reports are going. And then presumably all of the credits are in New Mexico and not like this one is City of Albuquerque, this one is outside of Albuquerque. So it just kind of question on how you align those.
Yeah, Steve, that's a really good question. And, you know, it's something that kind of came up in 2007 too, that we really need to consider how we administer this program jointly and independently at the same time. We can't have a local requirement that's really that much different than the state requirement, or we end up with the risk of having a third car, which is not allowed. And so that's one reason it's so important that we have the stakeholder process, that we work with stakeholders like you with, you know, with the auto industry, and that we work very closely with Maura to work out those items. Maura, go ahead and add to that, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, you know, this is our kickoff meeting, so there's still a lot of details that need to be worked out and research to be done, discussions to be had. So it's a great question, and we'll be, you know, sharing, you know, a little bit more on our thought process as we develop that and as we conduct more stakeholder meetings and present to the public. Thank you.
Okay, you know, thanks. And we'll certainly work with you on that as well.
Yeah, please. I was just going to suggest, Steve, you've been in this business for a long time. You were around in 2007 when we first went through this rulemaking, and we greatly appreciate your input as we go through this again.
Thanks.
Okay. What will the source of the hydrogen be and the source of energy to produce it? Water use for so-called green hydrogen. Lots of questions about how decarbonized hydrogen really is.
Yeah, so that question I'm sure came up with the slide that Claudia presented about a lot of different options for decarbonizing our economy. And hydrogen is one of those. It's one of those that the department is looking very closely at. And, you know, there could be a number of sources. There's green hydrogen, there's blue hydrogen, there's gray hydrogen, depending on the source of the hydrogen, depending on whether that carbon is the CO2 that's emitted is sequestered or not. So, you know, it's without really understanding a specific project, we can't really address where the hydrogen may be, the source of the hydrogen may be coming from, but it can come from renewables. I don't think that it would initiate from renewables. It'll probably initiate from something like methane. Hopefully it'd be methane waste from the oil and gas field. And then hopefully that CO2 that's emitted would then go into to be sequestered. But it's an exciting new area for the country, and an exciting new area for the state. And I think, you know, it's up to us to put ourselves out in front to make it happen for New Mexico so that we can advance our clean energy economy and make sure that when we do hydrogen, that we do it right so that it is protective of the environment and addresses climate change.
I see we still have Steve Douglas and the 928 number still have their hands up, and I'm not sure if just didn't put them down. Okay, maybe Steve did. And then the caller, did you have another question, or do you just need to put your hand down?
Sorry, I'm driving, so I don't know how to put my hand down.
Okay, noted. Okay. Another question in the chat. As EV vehicles age, what is the city and state's plan for battery disposal?
You know, I know, years ago when we were looking at this, that was an issue. I don't know how big of that issue that is today. I'll turn to the city to see if they understand if there's a recycling option for batteries or not.
Yeah, so I apologize. I started with the city during the pandemic, and there's still a lot to learn about what our sustainability plans are. And so I don't have an answer today, but happy to follow up after this meeting once I have a chance to speak with the right people.
Yeah, let's put that as one of our FAQs to follow up on.
Okay. Sandra, what other states have adopted the California rules? If you don't have the full list, we can get back to you on that. But
okay. Boy, we had a nice map. I don't know if Claudia, if you have that handy, but there are about 14 other states that have adopted, and others that are in the making. Right now, Nevada is ready to spring. Minnesota is almost there. We have Washington State going for, they are a LEV state. They're moving forward as a ZEV state. Oregon is a lot of the Northeast states are LEV ZEV states. Claudia, can you think of other obvious ones that I'm missing right now?
Colorado is another, is a neighboring state that has it. That's an important one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then really the rest are in the Northeast. So I think you got them all.
Great.
Also the District of Columbia, not a state, but not to be forgotten.
okay. Susan, I see your hand just went up. Go ahead, Susan Homer.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the timetable that it's appearing to take. Could you just review the timetable for me again? And because I understand that, as mentioned, all the documents that are necessary to support following the California standard have been presented to you. And I'm just concerned that it's going to take as long as you have said it was going to take at this point. And I wonder if you would tell me again, what are your steps?
Claudia, I'm going to ask you to go through the timeline that you had it, or you don't have to post the screen again, but go through the timeline that you discussed earlier.
To actually get it to implementation is what I'm talking about.
Okay, so you're so if I understand it right, you are wondering not about the timeline for rule adoption and decision making from the board, but what happens after that? Is that right?
Well, it's all part and parcel of the same thing, isn't it? Getting from here to when implementation is taking place.
Okay, so so what hasn't been so the timeline is that we're going to have stakeholder meetings and public input, public engagement over the next few months. Then we want to have a discussion draft that we release in October. That will be an opportunity in our discussion draft. So we'll use the input that we get about the early credits, as well as some of the implementation questions that were mentioned today, put all that out in discussion draft, be able to have some discussion with people, and then file a petition with our proposed rules in December before the two boards. That will be the board's opportunity to say whether they are willing to take up the clean car standards. And they will set a hearing date. So the hearing date that we are looking for is spring of 2022. Then after the boards and at a joint board hearing.
Could I stop you there? Why would that take from December until, why would it take 3 months before?
So during that process, we prepare testimony, which so we have expert testimony that needs to be developed. So that's that's really a heavy lift. That's where the documents that were asked for by some of the people in this meeting, for example, the preparation of the economic impact, the health impact, the emission reductions, all those technical documents that then provide the information that the board needs to be able to feel like they're making a decision that follows their process. The board's rulemaking process requires this kind of the process from December until spring.
And I just want to add that there's a 60-day notice requirement from the time that the board decides to take it up. And then that requirement also, you have to tack on another few weeks because it's 60 days published in the New Mexico registry. So just the notice requirements, will take 75 days. And that's fair, because we always want to give the public fair notice about rules going forward. That is for any rule that goes in front of the EIB. The requirements are the same in front of the Air Quality Control Board, that the notice requirements are long so that the public has an opportunity to engage. Now, we always do a pre-submittal, almost always do a pre-submittal hearing process, because we feel like this type of informal discussion is often where we get things right, where we can make improvements on the rule before it's even submitted to our board for discussion. But even after it's submitted, there'll be that other time period, which is generally about 75 days of notice prior to the hearing. So that's another piece of the puzzle as far as the length of time it takes to go to a hearing.
Okay, so then there's a hearing in the spring next in 22. And at that hearing, what happens?
So the hearing is where all of the testimony is presented, all the information is presented. At the hearing also is a place where the public can weigh in, and where any organization can also present testimony. It's a semi-judicial process. So once the hearing closes, then a report gets generated, and the boards have to reconvene to make a decision on the rules before them and consider the evidence that was presented at the hearing. So that process also can often take another 30 to 60 days before the board has all the information they need before them to make the final decision. So that could be July of 2022. And then if they approve the rules at that point, perhaps with some changes, then we still have to wait and get the documents in order to publish them in the register. That can take another few months. So once it gets published in the New Mexico Register, that is when the rules are final.
And you anticipate roughly that would be before the end of 2022?
That's right. And so I think your question was also about the next phase, the implementation. These rules in particular require 2 years notice to the auto manufacturers once they're on the books. So let's say that by October 22, 2 years, October 23, 2024. So that means the implementation, they begin to be effective in year 2025, which then implicates model year 2026. So the car manufacturers' cars come out a year early. So in 2025, they will be putting on the in the showroom model year 2026. So that is the next phase of the implementation of the rules, should they get adopted in October, is that they become effective in 2025 for model year 2026.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, so essentially we're not able to really move with the speed that we need to address what's happening to our Earth. Yeah, okay, thank you.
You know, and Susan, thank you for that question. We are moving as quickly and methodically, and still methodically as we can, because we see the urgency as well. Do we have to follow our state statutes, our regulations? If we trip up there, it could slow things down with a legal challenge, right? So it's really important that we pay attention to these things. Claudia, we should think about how to lay out this timeline in a way, you know, with all the little steps, so people like Susan can have that and really see why it takes as long as it takes to get these rules in place.
That sounds good. Thank you, Susan. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Susan, Claudia, and Sandra. I've had a couple of questions about sort of the state leading by example. Are there any, is there a push for a statewide purchasing agreement for electric vehicles? Is the state committed to buying only clean cars?
You know, it's funny, we could ask Ken Ortiz that question, because he used to be our GSD director who was moving us in that direction. I'm going to ask Jerry to see if he can pipe in here on this one.
Yeah, and again, as a representative of DOT, the Alternative Fuel Acquisition Act, right, requires us to consider alternative fuel vehicles. 75% of our fleets should fall into those categories, and they're actually defined under NMSA 1318-1. And so those are already on the books, and we work closely with GSD to make sure that we're meeting those goals. And these EV vehicles definitely fall within the parameters of the Alternative Fuel Acquisition Act here in the state of New Mexico.
And I also know the city's doing some work. Maura, do you want to address what the city's up to?
Yeah, so our sustainability team has been working, they've updated our ZEV first procurement policy, and we have been procuring hybrids and EVs for the city fleet. For example, the city purchased a new car for our deputy director position, which is what I usually, which is usually my my title, and that is an electric vehicle. So so yeah, that is part of our plans, in addition to you know, procuring electric buses, seeing if there are ways to accelerate the transition of diesel fueled school buses and other city fleets. We've also, to go along with that, we're also developing 32 new EV charging stations and have several clean transportation policies in our climate action plan, which was released in April. Thank you.
And I don't know, Mr. Ortiz, if you wanted to add anything to that. Definitely, we are very lucky, fortunate. I don't think lucky is the word, to have Mr. Ortiz as part of this as the previous Secretary of GSD. And so he may be able to speak a little bit more, you know, about this question as well, and the work that his agency before he left did to make sure we met these requirements. If he's still with us.
You know, I'm not seeing him in the attendees list anymore, so I think perhaps he jumped off. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other part is, of course, Acting Secretary Rodriguez will continue that work. She has been around state government for a long time, and she is, I'm sure, I don't want to speak on her behalf, but GSD has provisions in place to hold all agencies who are purchasing vehicles to the Alternative Fuel Acquisition Act, which requires 75% of those vehicles to meet those guidelines.
And I do just want to clarify, this is Maddie, that GSD is the State General Services Department, for those of you who are not intimately involved with the state. So, okay, I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to keep going with the chat questions. Let's see. What happens to, quote, dirty cars that are traded in?
You know, cars that don't meet the LevZev standards will be on the road until the owner decides that they don't need to be on the road anymore. It's nothing new, you know. We don't have a Cash for Clunkers program. You know, maybe it's time to bring that one back. But right now, the disposition of those vehicles won't be any different under a LevZev program as they are now.
Thanks, Sandra. Is there a number that represents what kind of dent this rule will put in New Mexico's greenhouse gas emissions total and the road to net zero?
Yeah, we're looking at the range of about 2 million tons by 2030. And we have a 2030 target of 45% below 2005 levels for New Mexico. And it will help us with that. It will help us meet that emission reduction target. Oil and gas, of course, makes up the largest portion of our greenhouse gas emissions, and we need to make, and we're making progress in that area. But yeah, we have some information about what it will do for the state overall in regards to meeting our emission reduction target.
Travis Madsen, do you want to go ahead?
Hi. Thanks for holding this meeting. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. So I just posted into the chat some language from the 2020 New Mexico Climate Strategy, which laid out a timeline that included an EIB petition in July of this year and a hearing later in the year. Could you tell us just a little bit more about the process that went into making that timeline and how the state decided to deviate from it?
You know, that was absolutely our goal. We had our eyes on that prize, and ideally we would go this year. It would just, you know, from what I'm hearing from many of the speakers here, that you want us to be as aggressive as possible. You want us to get these rules in place. You don't want to delay any model years that would be affected by this rule. But we just haven't had the resources to do that. And one of the big factors was the COVID pandemic. This department, you may think of us as just being the air quality people, the water quality people, handling hazardous waste in landfills. But especially this division, we were very active during COVID last year. My Occupational Health and Safety Bureau was 100% COVID all the time. We had to hire new people. We had to work with employers to keep employees safe. We had to work with employers to make sure that they were testing their employees as they should. We were trying to enforce the public health order, not just through the Occupational Health and Safety Program, but through the food program. Many of us had no weekend off all of last year between March and Christmas. In fact, we worked many weekends. So I know it's an issue. We really wanted this to go forward, but last year, especially this division, much of our time was taken up with the pandemic. Now, if we had nothing else on our plate right now, we could do this too, you know, but the ozone precursor rule is a big lift. That will reduce large amounts of VOCs and methane in New Mexico. We're counting on that. And that will have a big impact on our ability to meet our emission reduction goals. So if we didn't have all the technical testimony around that, if we didn't have that petition, if we didn't have to go before the board in September of this year, we could move more quickly on a clean car standard. But that is a huge lift and a really important one because those emissions are so great. Oil and gas emissions in the state are by far the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, and ozone, creating ozone problems for New Mexicans. We've got 7 counties in the state that are at, bumping up, or exceeding or just over the ambient standard for ozone, putting New Mexicans at risk. And we have to address that because it's our responsibility as the Environment Department to do so, but also because we've got state law that requires us to move forward with ozone. So this is an important issue. Clean cars matters. We believe firmly that it matters, and we have to do everything we can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in New Mexico. But this small agency, having taken on COVID, moving forward with the ozone precursor rule, cannot move at a rapid speed on this and get it done quickly, get it done efficiently, and get it done legally. So that's how things got pushed back. It wasn't our plan, but that's what happened.
Certainly appreciate all your work, and thank you for the explanation.
Thank you. Let's see. Why not extend emission testing requirements statewide?
So emission testing has come about primarily to address non-attainment from, at least in Maura, and maybe Dario can address this. The reason they have an emission testing program is the Bernalillo County was exceeding the standard, I believe, for carbon monoxide several years ago, and moved forward with an emission testing requirement in order to keep their program. If they didn't do it, the feds could come in and take that. Is Dario and Mara, am I getting that right?
Yeah, that is right.
What year did you start that program? Just
actually we have Travis Miller, who is our vehicle pollution manager on this call. So if I could send it his way.
Maybe while he's thinking about that, emission testing is something that could happen outside statewide, but it generally doesn't happen until you get to non-attainment or close to non-attainment. And it's got to be emissions testing that will address the pollution that is exceeding the federal health-based standards. So there's certain criteria that generally go into place. Most people don't like the emission testing requirements. They have a function. They're keeping Albuquerque within the standard for CO. They're compliant with federal law, but it would be, I think, it would be an unpopular thing to go forward with a statewide emission testing requirement unless the legislature asked us to do that. Did I see in the chat it was 1983 that was? Yeah, okay.
That's right. Wow. And we're also in the process of developing an emissions testing program for diesel vehicles. And so that will be coming in the future.
Currently, diesel is exempt, right?
Yes.
Diesel is exempt from the emission testing in Bernalillo County.
But didn't that change during the last legislative session? Yeah, Dario's nodding his head. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
when you can bring
SB 8, it gave us the authority to test diesel vehicles, and we plan to move forward with that.
Maddie and Claudia, do we have survey results we want to put up too?
So I've been posting them in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So people can follow along. Yeah. So thank you to everyone for participating in that. Good to see so many of you answered that you already own an electric vehicle. Happy to see that. We have a question that's not exactly about vehicles, but I'm confident that Sandra can answer it. What about agriculture and ranching's contributions? I'm assuming that this is in reference to their contributions to our emissions profile. We need all aspects in our state that contribute to the problem to be addressed.
Yeah, I don't know who asked that, but thank you. The governor's executive order formed the Climate Change Task Force, which is a multi-agency task force that is looking at all sources of emissions in the state and how to reduce those emissions to address climate change. And we have a number of working groups, and one of the working groups is called Natural and Working Lands. And so we have members from the Department of Ag that are on that committee, and members of actually the Environment Department, say surface water group, and they are looking at natural and working lands and how to get emission reductions in that sector. So while it's not, the largest sources of emissions for the state, we've got oil and gas, transportation, and electricity. We have to look at all sources. And so we will be trying to determine how best to get emission reductions from all sources, including natural and working lands, which includes agriculture.
Thanks, Sandra. Will the state be offering any grant funds to assist with the costs needed to make the upgrades needed to sell and service EVs?
So that sounds like it's like, how do we help the dealers on this? And we're all ears on how we can do that, if that's where this question is targeted. If there's things that we can do to, help the dealers and incentivize the sales of those particular vehicles, we'd love to hear it. This is about LevZev. And it wouldn't be part of the rulemaking process necessarily, but it's something we would like to consider because as Claudia had noted earlier, this is kind of an all hands on deck moment where we're looking at whatever we can do to get emission reductions in the transportation sector. And I see Jerry's camera's on. So Jerry, do you have something to add?
No, I just wanted to add, Ken Ortiz is on the line. He's on the phone number 688. And from a dealership perspective, maybe he'd like to add something on that. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that Mr. Ortiz is on the line. If you guys unmute him on 688, he might be able to lend how we can help incentivize or promote this type of initiatives through the Licensed Dealership Association.
Thank you, Jerry. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mr. Ortiz.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to transition from the computer to a telephone. Well, anyway, I apologize. When I first spoke today, I failed to introduce myself. So I was previously with the General Services Department, as was discussed earlier, and now my new role is president of the New Mexico Automotive Dealers Association. And so first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity. The association very much looks forward to continuing the discussion about opportunities. I mean, in the dealer world, we do care about the environment, the climate, our population, and we want to do our part. We just want to do it in a methodical way that the dealers can support. The infrastructure of charging stations, I'm happy that Jerry's leading the effort at Department of Transportation to put the infrastructure in place. And as far as GSD, as we were pursuing and purchasing electric vehicles, what we decided to do is relegate the electric vehicles for in town, if you will, within Albuquerque and Santa Fe, where there were infrastructure to support those. But as far as long distance travel, we decided not to move in that direction quite yet, not quite yet, because the infrastructure was not there. So going forward, part of me and the Dealers Association's job is to work with you to implement something that our dealers could stand behind and support and go forward. So I look forward to many more conversations with you and just happy to be part of the discussion. Thank you, Jerry, for introducing me.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to find which ones we haven't gotten to yet. You mentioned that the state has money available for electric charging stations. Have you thought about making this money go further by making grants available to businesses to cover a portion of charger and installation costs, like hotels, movie theaters, restaurants, etc.?
Let me get started. The New Mexico Environment Department has been handing out money to applicants from the Volkswagen Settlement Fund. And we maximized the portion of that fund that was allowed to be distributed for EV infrastructure. We're still handing that money out. We're not going open for another round of applications for EV infrastructure, but we will be reimbursing different businesses who have applied and have installed that EV infrastructure. So we've done that. Jerry, are there other opportunities that you know of for funding of EV infrastructure?
Yeah, so during this last legislative session, the Department of Transportation was given approximately $1.23 million to help expand and look at expanding EV charging stations through these corridors. What we've done is we've met with tourism and economic development to look at the opportunities of utilizing some of this funding to help expand upon the economic development portions that are going to bring e-tourism in. So tourism department is part of the discussion as well as economic development. And we look forward to any way we can support this, in the upcoming years to maximize every single dollar. We talked about the Volkswagen Settlement Fund. You can go to the website, and I think if somebody wants to share that on the chat, you can actually go to the website and see all of the recipients of the Volkswagen Settlement Fund and where they're actually putting these EV charging stations. So we have a multi-agency approach to working together as the state of New Mexico to make sure that we're stretching every single dollar that we're given and maximizing our footprint throughout our state, and we're not duplicating efforts. Some of the Volkswagen settlement funding, we realized that they were going into areas that already had a high level of chargers. And so we reconsidered and asked them to move them somewhere else. And so we're approaching it from a common sense approach as well to make sure that those dollars are stretched and that we're maximizing our footprint throughout the state of New Mexico.
Thanks, Jerry. Maura, do you have anything to add to that? Does the city have any resources available to add more charging stations around the city?
Yeah, so I think, getting these 32 stations planned and cited has been a significant effort. And so we're working on, implementing that. I don't know of any funding sources or any funding that the city is providing to private businesses, but I can definitely check with our sustainability staff and let folks know.
I want to show my granddaughter just to show you that everything, we're going to make a difference for my 3-year-old granddaughter. Everything that we're talking about is going to make sure that she has a bright future and that she's able to continue to enjoy our beautiful blue skies here in the state of New Mexico.
Pretty awesome, Jerry. Thanks for introducing her.
Thanks, Jerry. Let's see, another question we've got. Has the state adopted ordinances to incorporate conduit or potential second meter rate options for residents and businesses?
I don't know what that is. It may be a PRC question. You know what that is, Claudia?
Well, I can add something to the first part of that question. If the incorporating of conduits, a sustainable building tax credit did pass the legislature this year. And one of the ways that you can get funded or refunded is if you make your building EV ready, which is the conduit part. So we do have a tax credit available for those businesses and homes that that pre-wire their building for EV infrastructure for charging stations. So that's the first part, and I think I would echo what Sandra said about the second, which is setting rates for EV charging stations is under the purview of the Public Regulation Commission, and a very important tool in helping promote electric vehicle adoption. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So we have a couple questions wondering about if volunteers might be used to help in this effort, and also might our national labs be engaged on these efforts?
Boy, if you want to help apply for a job with the New Mexico Environment Department, we have positions open and we need passionate, okay, Maura too, apply with the state and then the city, because we need talented, passionate people who want to get this work done. So we'd love to see some of you in the queue at our state personnel office applying for environmental scientists and specialist positions or any other positions to help us move our climate change effort forward. We do engage with the labs when we can. They were as well as the universities. They've been very helpful in a number of our climate change efforts, not necessarily particularly on the clean cars piece, but they've been very helpful to us on the methane piece. They'll be helpful when we start looking at carbon capture and sequestration. They're going to be, very helpful to us on climate. So yes, we're really lucky to have that talent here in New Mexico and available to us. Mara, you want to make a pitch for how to apply for a job at the city?
I definitely do. We'll be putting the link in the chat, but we are actually looking for a regulation development coordinator to work specifically on this subject. And so it would be excellent to spread the word about that. I'll put the link in the chat shortly where folks can apply. Thank you. Oh, and we are also looking for attorneys, should anyone have that background and have an interest in air quality. Thank you.
So are we. We need more attorneys as well. So yeah, lots of employment opportunities, and it really is a good time to get really engaged on environment at the state and local level, because we've got administrations through Mayor Keller and through Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham who are really pushing hard to get this work done within the time period that we have while we're here. Anything else, Maddie?
There's one other question that I have outstanding. I think it's will capital outlay be restricted to clean cars?
Well, only if the legislators want to do that, and I don't see that happening. It would be awesome if they dedicated some of those resources, capital outlay resources, to this effort, but I don't see that happening overall.
Okay. And then one final question and comment. We know that tailpipe emissions fall most heavily on the low income and marginalized communities with outsized health impacts. Is there really no urgency in passing the rule and accelerating adoption to protect the health and well-being of vulnerable residents?
There absolutely is an urgency, but this is as quickly as we can move. I'd also want to say that this community is subject to impacts of elevated ozone in all 7 counties in the state that are elevated. And the work we are doing under the state's ozone initiative to reduce emissions in the oil and gas industry will also greatly benefit those communities. So yes, it's not just climate, it is improving air quality. And we know we've got disproportionately impacted communities that are affected by poor air quality. And we do have an urgency about moving forward and getting this work done as quickly as possible. But it just takes time.
Thanks, Sandra. And that's actually all the questions we have. I don't see any other hands raised, so we can go ahead and wrap it up unless I see any hands go up.
Well, I do want to say that as questions arise, please send them to us. We also have a listserv that we will be announcing future meetings or future ability for you all to participate in this stakeholder process and the rulemaking as it goes forward. But please keep your questions coming. You have Claudia's email address, and Claudia is going to be the main project manager and the keeper of this information. So don't hesitate to keep the communication flowing. It's how we get this right, and we really appreciate your participation tonight and in the coming months. Claudia, do you have something to add?
I just want to thank you all for being here with us and staying with us this evening. I just put the listserv chat in the chat, and I'll add my contact information in there as well. And yes, please do reach out to us. We want to solve all the issues that we can going forward collaboratively.
And Maura, do you want to say a few words to send us out?
Yeah, just a big thank you to everyone who participated. We know that your time is valuable, and the city and state definitely appreciate your participation and seeking more and substantive feedback from our stakeholders so that we can propose a reasonable rule that works for all. So thank you.
All right. We've kicked it off. We're so happy that you're here. We're excited about moving forward over this next several months to get these rules in place. We appreciate your participation. Have a great rest of your evening.